No matter which time control you play in chess, you're probably going to eventually run into the situation where you have a time scramble, meaning that it doesn't really matter what moves you make, you just have to stay alive before the time runs out. But of course, the moves you make really do matter in these situations, and in this video, we're going to be talking about how to make good enough moves to survive in a time scramble. I'll be showing some examples from some recent Blitz games that I played, but if you're not a Blitz bullet type of player and you don't really go for that sort of rush when you're playing chess online, if you're more of a classical over-the-board player, this is for you too. I have had plenty of time scrambles in my over-the-board tournament games, and learning things that helped me in Blitz and Bullet really also helped me when I was playing those games, and I've even won points because I was just stronger when it came down to the time scramble, even if my position was less than ideal. So the golden rule of surviving a time scramble is just don't lose. And it sounds very simple, but of course if you've been in this sort of situation, you know that things can get very complicated very quickly. But even if you're down a lot of material, the whole idea is not to get checkmated, because if you're going to actually play out the time scramble, you want to run your opponent's clock down before they have the chance to checkmate you. So again, even if your opponent's up a queen, if your opponent's up 2 rooks, a queen, and 7 bishops, it doesn't matter. You need to just not put your king on a square where it's going to get checkmated. So there are a few techniques for actually doing this. One of them is more defensive and one of them is more attacking, and it depends on the situation that you're in, the position on the board. In slower, less tactical positions, a lot of times the best advice for surviving a time scramble is just the turtle strategy, meaning you just bring all of your pieces close, surround your king with your own pieces, and start shuffling them around and hope your opponent will not be able to get to your king in time before their own clock runs out. The other strategy is the more attacking strategy, which usually involves giving checks. So finding where your opponent has a weakness, like a weak rank is a good spot, a weak diagonal to get your bishop in. If you can start giving checks, even checks that lose pieces, this can be enough sometimes if you're really down into it. If your opponent's got 0.3 seconds on the clock, give your queen away, just give a check, make your opponent have to take the time to move their king out of check or capture your piece, something they're not expecting. That's the more attacking way to go about winning in these kinds of time scrambles. Whoa, okay. Oh, I misclicked. It's fine. Okay. That was very messy at the end, but we got there. So making a checkmate threat is another way to make your opponent think, and that's just yet another strategy of trying to survive these time scrambles. If your opponent thinks that you might have a potential checkmate threat, they're going to have to waste time looking for ways to defend against this, especially if they don't have any good attacking moves themselves. So in this example I'm going to show you, my opponent actually spent too much time looking for those defensive moves because I was threatening the checkmate and missed the check that they had that would have won the game. I didn't realize I was so bad on time. Okay, run. There's no more checks. I don't think. I'm gonna move my knight and I'm gonna mate. Move knight here. Ah, okay, how about this? No, I'm losing. Wait, this is great for me. I'm no longer losing. I have nothing. Check, mate, boom. Okay, what an emotional roller coaster with 10 seconds left on the clock. I was way too slow in that game. Okay, they have mate and 2 here. What the heck? I assume it's this? Yeah, and then this. So of course, as I noticed pretty much immediately after the game, my opponent actually had a mate in 2 here in this position if they had found the correct check, which was the check with the knight, bringing the knight up, and my king only has 1 square to go. There's nothing that can capture that piece, and now my opponent has a few choices here. They can give the check like this. They can also give the check like this. Either way, it's going to be a checkmate. And notice my opponent is up an entire minute on the clock here, so they should have had plenty of time to find moves like this, but of course, we've all been there. We're looking to try and time our opponent out, and we don't think there's anything that we can do to stop the checkmate. We just simply miss the one move that wins. Totally understand. But of course, in this case, the way that I was able to win this game when I definitely should not have is by making my opponent think, so making things complicated. So the next thing I want to talk about is king safety, and we already sort of went through this with the turtling strat, just surrounding your king with your own pieces and then shuffling those pieces around close to the king on safe squares where they cannot be captured. Again, perfectly legitimate strategy for trying to time out your opponents in certain situations, but a lot of times the position will be a little bit more open, especially if there's fewer pieces on the board, like in a minor piece endgame or a rook endgame. You want to make sure that your king is in a place where ideally it cannot be checked, or at the very least where it can move to safety relatively quickly if your opponent does manage to find a check. So in the example we're going to be looking at, I did not do this. My opponent had a dark squared bishop, and I put my king on a dark square, and then I pushed pawn so that it could capture, opening up for the dark squared bishop to see. Let's watch the clip. Okay. Bullet mode. What? What? Oh my god. Oh dear. Jeez Louise. So here my opponent's down about 5 seconds on time here, and so my idea was to just shuffle my pieces around and try and time them out, try and maybe trade off some pawns, and then again, just be shuffling those pieces back and forth, and hopefully win the game with my 5-second time advantage when we were not playing with increment. Instead here, I already moved my king onto the dark square right in the path of this dark squared bishop, and with my next move, pushing the pawn forward, I allowed my opponent to capture this pawn, simultaneously attacking the bishop and having this check on my king. When the bishops are so far away, sometimes it's hard to see this, but if you know that your opponent, for example, has a dark squared bishop, probably not a great idea to put your king on a dark square, just in general, even if it looks like there's no way they could ever check your king. Keeping your king on the light squares just gives you that peace of mind. Another thing I've talked about in previous videos is if your opponent has a knight and you, for example, have a rook or another piece that could potentially be forked, putting your king and your rook, in that case, on different colored squares is a good way to prevent any forks, because the only way a knight can fork is on the same color square. So that's another good idea. Just getting your king to a place where it cannot be checked by anything. That, in general, is just a great plan. The next example we're going to look at is the importance of pawns when you are low on clock. So if it looks like you're going to run out of time, your best chance to at least salvage a draw is to get rid of all your opponent's pawns, especially if there's like no other pieces on the board. We're really looking at endgames here. Getting rid of pawns means that it will at least be a draw even if you run out of time. And in this example, we'll see, because my opponent was able to get rid of my pawns, even though I was up about 13 seconds on the clock, I couldn't win the game because I had no potential mating pieces left on the board, and pawns count as potential mating pieces because they are potential queens. 7 seconds for opponent. Okay, I'm losing, but I don't think I actually lose this. Unless they get rid of my pawns. No, it's a draw! I don't think there was any chance for me to get in there. So here, as we saw in the clip, my opponent was able to infiltrate with the king and eat up the last of my pawns, so that obviously white is winning here, but because they ran out of time, I'm unable to secure a win just because I don't have any mating pieces left on the board. I've had situations where I'm actually able to swindle a win out of a completely lost position just because my opponent forgot to take one last pawn that was left. So they might be up a queen, they might be up a couple of rooks or pieces, and just because I've got one pawn left, after they run out of time, I win the game because I still have that potential mating piece, and so there's technically still a chance. That's just how the system works. Thanks so much for watching. I wish you the best in winning all of your time scrambles. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you soon.